Number 1. The Beale ciphers. Let us start with a fortune that might be sitting in plain sight, hidden inside 3 pages of numbers. The story goes like this. In the 1800s, a man named Thomas Beale buried a huge haul of gold and silver somewhere in the hills of Virginia, and then left behind 3 coded messages, 3 long lists of numbers, that together reveal what the treasure is, exactly where it's buried, and who it belongs to. Then he vanished, and the papers ended up in a stranger's hands. Here is the maddening part. One of the 3 ciphers has actually been cracked. Somebody worked out that the numbers correspond to words in the Declaration of Independence. You take the numbered word, grab its first letter, and it spells out a message. And that solved page describes the treasure. Thousands of pounds of gold and silver. The problem? It is the 2 ciphers that name the exact location that have never, ever been broken. We have the receipt. We just cannot read the map. For over a century, people have thrown everything at those 2 pages. Amateur code breakers, professional cryptographers, serious computing power, and gotten nowhere. And there is an honest caveat I have to give you, because it is a good one. Plenty of experts think the whole thing is an elaborate hoax, a 19th century pamphlet designed to sell copies. The treasure might not exist at all, but somewhere out there, the answer might genuinely be sitting on a page, unread, waiting for the right person to notice. That fortune might be a beautiful lie. The next one was absolutely real. An entire room made of gold and jewels, and it vanished into the smoke of a war. Number 2. The Amber Room. Imagine an entire room, every wall, floor to ceiling, paneled in glowing amber, backed with gold leaf and mirrors, so dazzling that people called it the 8th wonder of the world. This actually existed. It was a breathtaking chamber gifted to a Russian czar, installed in a palace near what is now St. Petersburg, and for 200 years it was one of the great treasures of Europe. And then, in the chaos of the Second World War, it disappeared. When German forces invaded in 1941, they stripped the Amber Room panel by panel, packed it into crates, and shipped it west to the city of Königsberg. And that, crated up sometime around 1944, is the last anyone reliably saw of it. After that, the trail simply goes cold. So where is it? 3 possibilities, and they pull in different directions. The romantic one, the one that launches expeditions to this day, is that it survived, still crated, hidden in a mine or a bunker, or the hold of a sunken ship, waiting to be found. The middle reading is that it was broken up, and fragments have quietly surfaced over the decades. And the mainstream reading, the one most historians reluctantly land on, is the least satisfying of all. That it almost certainly burned when Königsberg was bombed and gutted at the end of the war. The treasure that thousands of people are still hunting may simply be ash. They did build a stunning replica in the 2000s, which is either a comfort or a quiet heartbreak, depending on how you look at it. And it has a body count of its own. Several people connected to the hunt over the years have died in odd circumstances, enough to spawn talk of an Amber Room curse. Keep that firmly in the legend column, but keep it in mind, because it is a theme we are going to keep bumping into. The Amber Room may have gone up in flames. The next treasure was carefully written down, on a scroll made of solid metal, and we still cannot find 1 coin of it. Number 3. The Copper Scroll. In the 1940s and 50s, in caves near the Dead Sea, some of the most famous documents in history were discovered. The Dead Sea Scrolls, ancient religious texts written on parchment and papyrus. But one of them was not like the others. It was not written on parchment. It was engraved into a thin sheet of copper, and it was not scripture. It was a list. Specifically, it is an inventory, a detailed catalog of dozens of hiding places, each supposedly holding a stash of gold and silver, adding up, by some readings, to an almost unbelievable amount of precious metal. It is, in the most literal sense, a 2,000-year-old treasure map etched into metal so it would last, which it did. So we should be rich, right? Here is the catch, and it is a brutal one. The scroll tells you the treasure is hidden under the steps, or in the tomb, or 40 cubits from some cistern, using landmarks that were obvious to a person standing there 2,000 years ago, and that mean absolutely nothing today. The places are gone, the reference points are dust. It is a set of perfect directions to a world that no longer exists. And scholars still argue about the basics. Whether this was real temple treasure, hidden in a hurry before the Romans arrived, or a symbolic list, or simply folklore written down. The honest answer is that it probably points to something that was once real and is now most likely unrecoverable. That treasure's problem was directions we can no longer read. The next one's problem is that it is spread across the floor of an entire ocean. Number 4. The Fleur de la Mar. This is often called one of the richest ships ever lost at sea, which, given how many treasure ships have sunk over the centuries, is a genuinely staggering claim. The Fleur de la Mar was a Portuguese carrack, and in 1511 it was sailing home absolutely groaning with plundered treasure, a vast haul of looted gold, jewels, and other spoils, so heavy that the ship was reportedly overloaded and barely seaworthy. And then it sailed straight into a storm in the Strait of Malacca, off what is now Indonesia, and it went down. The value of what it was carrying is estimated, and I stress estimated because these numbers are basically educated guesses, at a truly colossal sum, the kind of figure that makes treasure hunters lose sleep. And more than 500 years later, despite all that, nobody has ever definitively found the wreck. The reasons are almost poetic. The strait has shifting sands and currents that bury and move wreckage. The exact spot where it sank is genuinely uncertain, and there is a very modern problem layered on top of the ancient one. Several countries would all have a claim to the treasure if it were found, so any search is tangled in politics before a single diver gets wet. The story even goes that as the ship foundered, the treasure was simply too heavy and too vast to save, a fortune quietly watching itself sink into the dark. That fortune sank by accident, in a storm. The next one was hidden on purpose, buried by an army that already knew it was going to lose. Number 5. Yamashita's gold. A word of warning on this one, because it lives right on the border between history and myth. As the Second World War turned against Japan in the Pacific, a legend was born. The Japanese forces had looted an immense fortune from all across occupied Asia, gold, jewels, priceless artifacts, and unable to ship it home as the Allies closed in, buried it in a network of caves and tunnels across the Philippines, fully intending to return for it once the war was won. They did not win. And the treasure, so the story goes, is still down there. It's named after the Japanese general who commanded in the Philippines, Tomoyuki Yamashita. Now here is where it gets genuinely contested. A lot of serious historians think Yamashita's gold is largely a myth, that there is little solid evidence such a centralized hoard ever existed. But it refuses to die, and there is a very concrete reason why. Decades ago, a Filipino man claimed he had actually found part of it, including a solid gold Buddha statue, only for it to be seized. The dispute went all the way through the courts, and a case was ultimately decided in his favor over the seizure. So you have historians saying it's probably a fairy tale, and a real court case treating a piece of it as real. Maddening does not begin to cover it, and the tunnels are said to be rigged, booby-trapped, and prone to collapse. People have gone digging for Yamashita's gold and died doing it, in cave-ins and accidents, which means, myth or not, this treasure has already taken real lives. The hunt is deadly even where the gold might be imaginary. Yamashita's gold may be a myth that people have died believing. The next one is very real, very dangerous, and it has quietly swallowed a mountain of money and more than a few lives. Number 6. The Lost Dutchman Mine. In the Superstition Mountains of Arizona, a name that really tells you everything, there is said to be a gold mine so impossibly rich that it made one man quietly wealthy in the 1800s. He was a German immigrant, and back then Germans were often called Dutchmen, which is where the name comes from. He supposedly knew the location of this fabulous mine, and he guarded that secret fiercely his entire life. And when he died, he took the exact location with him, leaving behind only vague, tantalizing clues. Ever since, people have poured into those mountains looking for it, and this is the point in our list where a running theme stops being a fun tagline and turns genuinely grim, because the Superstition Mountains have a real, documented habit of killing the people who go searching. Over the decades, treasure hunters have died out there, some from the brutal heat and the unforgiving terrain, some in falls, some who simply walked in looking for the mine and were never seen alive again. There are stories of searchers found dead with cryptic notes, of expeditions that ended in tragedy. And here is the thing you have to sit with. It doesn't even matter, for those deaths, whether the mine is real. Plenty of geologists are deeply skeptical that a mine like the one described could even exist in those particular mountains. But the bodies are not a legend. Whatever is or isn't buried in the superstitions, the search itself has a body count. And it is still climbing, because people still go. Hold that thought. The idea that the hunt can cost more than the prize, because it is about to become the whole point of this video. Quick aside, right at the turn. From here on, these stories get darker and stranger, and they build to the single most famous unsolved treasure hole on the planet. If you are enjoying this, the history, the greed, the honest bit where I tell you which ones are probably nonsense, subscribing genuinely helps the channel more than anything else. It is the one thing that tells the algorithm to show this to other people who'd want to dig into it with us. No hard sell. Now, back to the gold. Number 7. The Nazi Gold Train. This one is a beautiful lesson in how treasure fever actually works. For decades, there has been a legend in southwestern Poland about a train, an armored train loaded with Nazi gold and looted valuables, that was driven into a tunnel in the mountains as the Third Reich collapsed at the end of the war and then sealed inside and lost. A whole train full of gold walled up in a hillside. It is the kind of story that sounds too good to be true, which, spoiler, is foreshadowing. In 2015, 2 men announced to the world that they had found it. They said they had ground-scanning evidence of the train, hidden in exactly the kind of tunnel the legend described. And the world absolutely lost its mind. News crews descended on the little town of Wałbrzych. Treasure hunters poured in. The price of nearby property reportedly jumped. Everyone was certain that history was about to be dug out of a Polish mountainside. And then they dug. And there was no train. Detailed scientific surveys of the site found no tunnel, no carriages, no gold, nothing but rock and groundwater. The whole thing evaporated. And that is exactly why it earns its place on this list. Because for every genuinely lost hoard out there, there is a mirage. A story so seductive that it pulls in money and hope and headlines and then delivers a hole full of dirt. It is the treasure hunter's oldest heartbreak playing out live on the news. That treasure was never there at all. The next one absolutely was, so vast that an entire empire tortured people trying to find it and still came up empty. Number 8. Atahualpa's Ransom. In 1532, Spanish conquistadors captured the emperor of the Inca, a man named Atahualpa. And Atahualpa made them an offer that has echoed for 500 years. Let me go, and I will fill a room, an entire room, with gold, and 2 more with silver. The Spanish agreed. And from all across the Inca Empire, an astonishing river of gold began flowing toward them as ransom. But the Spanish, being the Spanish, did not honor the deal. Before all the gold had even arrived, they executed Atahualpa anyway. And according to the legend, one of his generals was still on the road, leading an enormous caravan of gold toward the ransom, when word reached him that the emperor was already dead. So he did the only thing that made sense. He turned the caravan around, marched it deep into the brutal Languenates Mountains of Ecuador, and hid the entire fortune where the Spanish would never find it. And they never did. For centuries since, that lost Inca gold has drawn expedition after expedition into those mountains, aided by a famously cryptic old guide document, a set of directions that has led many people in and brought disturbingly few of them back out, because the Languenates are a genuine death trap, freezing, permanently shrouded in mist, riddled with cliffs and bogs, almost impossible to navigate. Searchers have died in there of exposure and accidents for hundreds of years. The mountains themselves are the vault, and they have kept the door shut with the weather and the terrain and, quite frankly, the bodies of the people who tried to open it. That gold was hidden by people fleeing a dying empire. The next treasure is one you already think you know, and most of what you think is a story we invented. Number 9. Pirate treasure. Let me gently ruin a childhood fantasy. Buried pirate treasure, the chest of gold, the island, the map with a big red X, is almost entirely a myth. Real pirates did not bury their loot and draw maps to it. They spent it, gloriously and immediately, on exactly the things you would expect sailors with a sudden windfall to spend it on. The whole buried treasure idea largely comes from later fiction, not history. So, mostly, there is no pirate gold waiting under a palm tree, mostly. Because there is one glorious exception that keeps the dream alive. Blackbeard. Edward Teach, the most famous pirate who ever lived, was reportedly asked where his money was, and as the legend has it, he grinned and said that nobody but himself and the devil knew where it was, and the last one standing would take it all. Whether he ever actually said that, we cannot prove, but he said enough and hid enough that people have hunted for Blackbeard's treasure ever since. And here is where the fantasy collides with something solid. We have actually found Blackbeard's flagship. The wreck of the Queen Anne's Revenge was discovered off the coast of North Carolina, and it is real, and it has been studied. So the ship is documented history. The buried chest of gold, that is still firmly a legend, never found, quite possibly never existed, which is the perfect note to end on, because it takes us to the one place where the pirate fantasy and a real, physical hole in the ground have been colliding for over 200 years. Pirate gold is mostly a story we tell ourselves, but there is one hole in the ground where the story simply refuses to die, and it is the one we're finishing on. Number 10. Oak Island. Off the coast of Nova Scotia in Canada, there is a small, unremarkable island, and on it is the single most famous unsolved treasure site in the world, a spot known as the Money Pit. The story begins in the 790s when, supposedly, some young men noticed a strange depression in the ground under a tree and started to dig, convinced someone had buried something there, and as they dug, they hit layers, wooden platforms every few meters down, as if the shaft had been deliberately constructed and sealed, which is exactly the sort of thing that makes a person keep digging. And then the island fought back, because as diggers went deeper over the years, the pit flooded, filling with seawater, again and again, seemingly through channels that connect it to the ocean. Some believe these are man-made flood tunnels, an ancient booby trap designed to drown the shaft the moment anyone got close to whatever is at the bottom. For over 200 years, people have battled that water, with bigger and bigger machines, with modern engineering, with millions upon millions of dollars. And to this day, nobody has ever definitively reached the bottom or pulled out any grand treasure. Just fragments. Tantalizing little scraps that keep the dream just barely alive. So what is down there? Take your pick. The wild theories say Templar treasure, or the lost jewels of Marie Antoinette, or secret manuscripts proving somebody else wrote Shakespeare, or classic pirate gold. The middle view says it might be something real but far more boring, an old colonial-era structure, perhaps. And the mainstream skeptical reading, the one the evidence honestly leans toward, is that the Money Pit may be a natural sinkhole, a quirk of the island's geology, and that 2 centuries of hopeful digging simply built a legend on top of it. But, and this is why it endures, it has never been fully, finally resolved. And there is one more detail that keeps it burning. A legend that 7 people must die before the island gives up its secret. By many counts, 6 already have, in accidents over the years of digging. One short. And still, every single year, people go back. The hole has swallowed lives and fortunes and over 2 centuries of human effort, and it has given up almost nothing in return, and it has never, ever been more popular. Which in the end is the whole strange truth of this list. Every one of these treasures, the real ones, the fake ones, the ones made of ash and rumor, has cost the people chasing it far more than it could ever pay back. The gold is almost beside the point. What people are really chasing is the possibility, the intoxicating chance that the extraordinary is hiding just under the ordinary ground beneath their feet. So the next time you hear that some great fortune is still out there, under a field, beneath the waves, sealed in a mountain, picture that flooding hole on Oak Island. Somewhere, right now, someone is digging. The treasure might not be real, but the hole always is. And maybe that is the most human thing we ever do. Keep digging long past the point of sense, for the chance that this time the ground is hiding something wonderful.